Welcome to the Millennial Rant, a podcast about whatever's bothering me today. With topics ranging from politics to pop culture, there's a rant to cover everyone. For more Millennial Rant content, you can join me on the web at millennialrant.com. Last year, around the same time, I told my 9/11 story, and I was tempted to tell it again just because it is important that we tell these stories. And people will say, it happened in the past, we need to just let it go and move on. This is one of those things you can't just let go and move on. We can learn from it, we don't have to cling to it, but we still need to remember, especially since so many people are going to be impacted by it for the rest of their lives. I mean, the whole world changed that day. And if you think I'm exaggerating, then you're too young to know what the world was like before. Instead of telling my 9/11 story, I wanted to focus on the heroes, the real heroes, which is why I'm wearing this, because it's a reminder that there are real heroes in this world, that there are people who really are willing to put their lives on the line for the sake of others simply because it's the right thing to do. And people who don't remember 9/11, who weren't alive when 9/11 happened, you can't understand what kind of event it was. It's one of those events where you know exactly where you were and exactly what was happening, and you'll never forget it no matter what. And I know this because when I was, 10, I think I was doing a history project for my 5th grade class, and we had to talk to one of our older living relatives and get a story from their life. And so I was talking to my great grandmother about December 7th, the day that lives in infamy. And she was, my great grandma was 98 in my mind until the day that she died at like 97. So I don't know exactly how old she was, but she remembered perfectly, vividly where she was and what was happening and when she heard about it. And I wondered, what would it be like to live an event like that you just couldn't not remember? And that's what 9/11 is. It's one of those things. But so much of that day was reactionary. The planes hit the towers in the morning, and from that point until even well after they collapsed, people were doing everything that they could to evacuate the buildings, to protect and rescue as many people as they could. There were policemen, there were firefighters, there were regular, average, everyday Joes who ran into these buildings that were on fire, that were unstable. And they would go up and they would bring people out, and then they would go back in. And they would bring people out, and they would go back in and bring people out. It was so choked with smoke. It was so horrifyingly overwhelmed with fire and heat and smoke that people went up because they couldn't bear to go down. And they jumped from the roof of the building because they would rather fall to their deaths than suffocate or burn to death. It was horrifying. Everything about it was horrifying. My dad was stationed at the Pentagon at the time. They were undergoing renovations. They'd actually just finished a major renovation on the Navy wing, reinforcing it. There hadn't really been a change to the structure of the Pentagon since it was thrown up basically overnight in like the 50s. And so they were reinforcing everything: steel, rebar, concrete, ballistic, glass, all of the things. They were reinforcing the building with all of the things. And they had just finished the Navy wing, and they were going and doing a meeting that morning about logistics, about shifting everybody in the next wing, which I'm pretty sure it was the Air Force wing, which was going to be done next. So they were shifting everybody from the Air Force wing into the Navy wing. And it was basically just like this big circle. Everybody was going to move around as they started and finished a section. And that day, that 747 crashed into the Navy wing of the Pentagon. The one that had just finished the construction, that had just been reinforced. If it had crashed into any other wall, any other wing in the Pentagon, and the Pentagon would not be here. It would have gone straight through. It would have killed thousands, hundreds maybe of thousands of people. And I'm not saying that it was a good thing that it crashed into that wing. It was definitely not good in any sense of the word, but it was the least devastating that it crashed there, that they had reinforced it so much that it was strong enough to stop a 747 from flying into the building at, I believe, the third ring. So still horrifying, still like I thought my dad was fine. When my mom came to pick us up from school, she told us that he was fine. I didn't find out until like 3 years ago that she was lying through her teeth, and she had absolutely no idea if my dad was dead or alive. She didn't even know if he had made it back to the Pentagon or not, because he dropped me off at school that morning. And she said, when I was talking to her about it a couple years ago, she said she was reasonably sure that he couldn't have made it in time, because after he dropped me off, he came home, he watched the news for about 20 minutes, he called the Pentagon to get their read on things, and then he left. And she said that 20 minutes saved his life. And it did, because the plane that hit the Pentagon flew over my dad as he was coming off the Beltway, and if he had been any sooner, he would have been in the Pentagon, if not in the Navy wing at that meeting. And it's brutal. It's genuinely brutal that people could do such horrible things to each other. And not only can people do horrible things to each other like this, but there are people who think that they're justified. People in America who think that they are justified in doing these horrible things. Murdering hundreds of, if not thousands of people. It was chaotic. It was terrifying. There are no words to accurately describe it. The only thing that I can do is to tell the story in such a way that you feel it. And I did that last year, and I'll probably revisit it again. But for now, again, I want to focus on the people who rose above that, who rose above the chaos, who rose above the horror, who rose above the not knowing, and did what they had to do because it was right. The people on the last flight, the plane that went down in Pennsylvania, by the time they were on their way to DC, they knew what was happening. They knew what they were in for. Up until this point, there had never been any precedent for the caring for the passengers. Like there was no, if a plane was hijacked, it was because the passengers were being used as ransom. And so all of the protocols that were in place were about protecting the lives of the passengers on the plane while they were on the plane. No one ever thought that anyone would fly a plane into a building and kill all of those people. Nobody thought that. It wasn't even a remote possibility in anyone's mind. So when the planes were hijacked, the people sat in their seats and they waited for the calls to go through. They waited for, whatever it was that the kidnappers wanted to have, their demands met. They didn't have any demands. They never contacted anybody. They just killed themselves and everybody on the plane. All the people on the plane, on that last plane, they heard. They'd heard what was going on. They understood that if they didn't do anything, they were all going to die. And not only were they all going to die, but thousands of other people were going to die too. There's speculation. Nobody really knows where that last plane was headed, but there's speculation it was either the Capitol building or the White House. Probably the Capitol building. That would have been the most devastating. There would have been senators and congressmen and judges, and just it would have been very, very bad. So they fought back, and they overcame the hijackers just enough to crash the plane, and they all died. And there are recordings from people who called their loved ones as the plane was going down to tell them what happened and that they loved them, and that whatever happened from here on out, they would be watching over them. I can't imagine getting that phone call. I think it would be worse to not get that phone call. Could you imagine rolling that over to voicemail because you're busy and you can't think about it right now? I would be devastated for probably the rest of my life. Admittedly, things were different then. We didn't really have cell phones then the way we have cell phones now. It was more home phones. Messages would have been left on answering machines and that sort of thing. Even still, to get that after the fact. But maybe that was even more of a comfort to know that they had something left from their loved one, to know that their loved one did everything that they could to protect the nation, that they died heroes. People don't really remember them, which is terrible, because they're heroes. And I don't know why the terrorists chose the targets that they did in the order that they chose them. Maybe it was simple convenience, depending on what was closest to what. But could you imagine if they'd started with the Capitol building? I don't know. I haven't looked it up. I don't know if Congress was in session or not. But if they had crashed into the Capitol building on either the Senate or the House side, mass chaos. And we had just had an election. All of those people would have just been, sworn in. It had been a year since the election in 2020, or 2000, almost a year. Even still, mass chaos. It would have been complete insanity. I don't know if you've ever seen Designated Survivor, but a lot like that. It would have been a lot like that. Especially depending on who was there. But, and then, of course, there were the firefighters and the policemen that I mentioned who helped with the towers. Nobody expected the towers to come down. I just, looking at them and seeing the smoke billow and then watching them just kind of like ripple. I don't know if there's another word for it, where they just kind of like shuddered, rippled, and then all the way imploding, falling in on itself. And there were people in there. There were people who had gotten out, who had gone back in to help other people get out, who were in there. And it's just, you can't forget that. You shouldn't forget that. And everybody who says that you should forget that, what a horrible disservice to the people who gave their lives. I said last year that if we don't learn from this, it was going to happen again and again and again. And when the attack happened on Israel, that was their 9/11. And I don't know if there will be another one like that in America. December 7th was a different world. 9/11 was a different world. And I don't think it wouldn't happen because there aren't people who would want to do it. I think it wouldn't happen because December 7th and 9/11 told people who we are when we're under fire. When we're being attacked, we pull together like nothing you've ever seen. The love and the camaraderie and the grace that happened after 9/11 can't be reproduced for anything less. And I think our enemies know that now. They know we're stronger when we're attacked from without, which is why they've started attacking us from within, dividing us against one another, pitting us against one another, painting this red and that blue, telling us, this is black and that's white and this is wrong and this is right, and you don't know, you can't find any middle ground. There is no middle ground anymore. It's all polarized. We're not allowed to get along with or treat well the people we disagree with anymore. It all has to be yelling and screaming and devaluing and dehumanizing. Because a house divided can't stand. And the only way to destroy America is to make us destroy ourselves. And we're very close to destroying ourselves. I said this in my video about the attack on Donald Trump. We were so close. People will think that this is an exaggeration. They'll think that I'm blowing things out of proportion, but we were so close to imploding into a civil war. Nobody, I think, truly appreciates the fact that we avoided it by a literal hair. Like that bullet nicked his ear that close to his head. And that heroic man who threw himself over his family and was killed, nobody really appreciates how close we were. Maybe that is the closest thing we'll get to a 9/11 that we've seen in a long time. It can't be the same. Everybody feels differently about Donald Trump. No one really felt differently about 9/11. But we have to come together. Or we're just going to keep seeing it again and again and again. Different ways, different people, same result, same feeling, same devastation. There are things that we can do to fix the world that we're living in right now. The problem is that there are people who don't want us to fix it. They want us to live this way. They want us to drive a wedge more deeply between us because it puts us in a position where we're vulnerable. where we can be controlled. We just want everything to go back to normal. Nothing was ever normal. You settle into comfortable. After 9/11, we settled into a new comfortable. After 2020, COVID, we settled into a new comfortable. I don't know as we could ever call anything normal. What's normal? By whose estimation? But if we don't do something, there's not going to be a lot of comfortable left. If we allow our country, our world to be torn down, ripped apart, destroyed, there's nowhere else to go. We're it. We have to learn how to get along with each other, to appreciate each other, even if we don't agree with each other. To remember that we are all human beings. We're all in this together, if you catch that reference. And it's not too late to choose love over violence, or to choose love over intolerance, to choose love over hatred, division, selfishness. I don't want to see my country fall apart, and I will do everything I can to do my part to protect it, but I can only do my part. Your part is up to you.